So I think we've got everyone on. So we've got a few names that I haven't necessarily seen tonight. So hi, everybody. I'm Juliana. I'm the head of admissions at TrinityPrep. This is Adam Fadel from the Corner, the Institute for Transformation. He's going to be talking to us about dealing with stress, parenting in this stressful time, and helping your teenagers deal with stress. And we do these talks typically once a month. So Adam, if you would like to take it away.
Sure. I'm going to ask if anyone else would consider turning on their camera. That would be helpful. This is going to be a little bit more interactive. So I understand if you're not able to do that. Oh, thank you. It just makes it a little bit more personal when I can actually see faces. So Juliana, I am the clinical director for the Corner Institute for Transformation, licensed marriage and family therapist, a supervisor for graduate students, and an adjunct professor at Pfeiffer University. I've been in practice between North Carolina and Los Angeles, coming up on about 11 years. And we primarily focus on marriage and marriage crisis, trauma, addiction, sexual identity issues, and then some family bonding, which has primarily been around helping families reconnect with the loss of a loved one to suicide. So I did make I think this is a little bit comical. Juliana sent out a photo of me, and it's the photo from our website. And I did not intend to do this, but I am literally wearing the same exact outfit that I have on in that photo, which was a few years ago. So I thought that was kind of funny when I saw that today. So I'm going to walk you through some practical exercises of how to deal with your own stress. And then we can have a Q&A, hopefully about either parenting or helping your kids just navigate some of their stress and anxiety, but more with the purpose of moving towards health. And so the first part of this is going to be a little bit of an exercise. But one thing I want you to keep in mind, and I think is probably the most important question that I'll ask you tonight, is what do you look like and feel like when you are healthy? And so a couple ways to think about what I'm going to walk you through. So one of the ways to actually deal with stress and anxiety is gratitude. Some of you have probably heard that before. It's neurologically, it's not possible for your brain to be both curious and frustrated at the same time. It's also not possible for your heart to be anxious and grateful at the same time. And so I want you to walk this exercise. So take a deep breath. And I want you to scale down into your body, 0 to 10, from your shoulders down to your waist. 0 to 10, where you feel any stress, anxiety, tension, discomfort anywhere in your body. Just recognize where it is. Just give it a number. And then one way to think about gratitude, there's many things in life that we could be grateful for. Your home, your car, your family, your dog, your office, whatever it is. But the one thing outside of a relationship with God that's most powerful is people. And so what I want you to do is I want you to bring to mind the first person. You can close your eyes if you want to. The first person that comes to mind that you are most grateful for. And I want you to bring that person to mind. And I want you to look into their eyes. And what's one thing in that relationship that you're grateful for? Just pick one. There might be many. Just pick one. And then I want you to look into their eyes, and I want you to think of that thing that they do that you're grateful for. I want you to hold that together for 10 seconds. Take a deep breath. Let it go. Who's the next person that comes to mind that you're most grateful for? I want you to bring that person to mind. Look into their eyes. And what's one thing that you're grateful for in the relationship with that person? Bring that to mind. think of what that looks like in your relationship with them, and hold looking into their eyes and that thing you're grateful for together for about 10 seconds. Take a deep breath. Let it go. And one more person. Who's the next person that comes to mind? I want you to think of that person. Look into their eyes. And what's one thing you're grateful for in the relationship with them? Hold those two things together for about 10 seconds. Take a deep breath. Let it go. Take one more. Let it go. If you scale down or scan down into your body below your shoulders, do any of you notice, by show of hands, any difference in the way that your nervous system feels right now? 1, 2. No, a little bit. Oh, I got a clap and thing. Okay. All right. So out of all the things that you can do, that exercise typically takes about 2 minutes max. It's one of the most practical and one of the most helpful that I've used with clients, and that I encourage people to do, because you can do that anywhere. You can do that at your desk. You can do that at home. You can even do that with your kids. You can do that with your spouse. And actually helping them learn how to find things that they're grateful for and identify them and connect to them when they're stressed out is one of the most helpful things that's going to help regulate their nervous system. So understanding what's going on in your body is a big component to how you're going to manage your stress levels and prevent yourself from being burnt out. I'm going to tell you a story that's going to relate to an idea of modeling. All of your parents, I'm a parent. I have a 7-year-old, a 4.5-year-old, and a 3.5-year-old. And so these are things that we actually practice with our kids. But one of the things that's important is also what you're modeling for your kids. Because if you're stressed out and you don't know how to manage that well, then your kids are going to be impacted by that. All of you that are parents already know that. But sometimes we don't think about what we're actually doing that they might be paying attention to, or they might be watching. And my experience has been with especially, we'll say 10 to 17-year-olds, is that they are paying attention much more than we think they are. So I'm going to tell you a story about before I had children, about an unhealthy way that I was going to start dealing with some of my stress. I was in graduate school. I think I had a semester left, and I had papers due and tests to do and clinical hours to finish. And I remember going home, and I remember being so stressed out that I went straight to the refrigerator in our home. I lived with a few other guys, and I literally grabbed in the fridge for a beer. I was old enough to drink, but and I realized in that moment that what I was actually about to do was connect my stress and anxiety levels to a substance that was going to at least bring some relief. But the danger in that, just like there is with any substance or video games or food, is that you start making associations neurologically and emotionally. And that usually is what generates some pattern of, if it doesn't become a full-on addiction, of really destructive coping mechanisms for all of us. And so part of it, I realized in that moment, so I put the beer back, and I was very thankful that I was conscious enough to not do that. I went, and a buddy of mine was home, and we sat outside and just talked through my stress and how to navigate what I needed to finish. And then an hour or two later, we drank a beer together. And that's significant because the association of my stress wasn't with that substance. And so when you're thinking through how you're going to help your teenagers navigate how they're going to deal with stress, I think the first thing we need to look at is how do we help them recognize what actual health is? And then we actually help them recognize the gratitude, like where in their lives can they be grateful even when life is hard? And then we model for them the best ways we can to deal with our own stress. Because the reality is, and if you've ever worked for a boss or a team member or a team or coached a team or whatever, and you weren't in a healthy place, or the people you were around were not in a healthy place, then it had an impact on you. And it's really foolish for us to think that we don't have that kind of impact on our children, because they're around us the most. And our presence in our homes is going to severely impact, you can call it their emotional or mental health. One other framework that's really practical, I believe, in terms of helping yourselves and your children navigate their own stress levels and reduce anxiety and not become depressed, is a model that even the medical community uses. So if you go to a doctor, they look for basic functioning. They look for sleep, diet, exercise, and relationships. So we already talked about relationships, the value of recognizing who in your life is important to you and that you trust and that you can depend on. And the other three, I actually believe, I do not have statistics to back this up, but I think that if people actually got consistent, decent sleep every night, that half of the mental health and emotional health and the psychological issues that are in the United States right now would not exist. I think that much of it is connected to people overworking, burning out, and not resting. So the other two are diet and exercise. So when you do an evaluation of your own life and you're looking at, if you're going to bed late and waking up early and you're not rested, it's the impact and how that's going to ripple out into your children's lives. And if they're not on a consistent sleep schedule, that's going to impact. I mean, most of you have kids that are older than mine, so you've seen this play out in some ways. But where I think we need to, as parents, kind of refocus is, what does it look like? What do those things in our life look like, so that we're modeling them well for our children? Another thing that I think would be helpful as parents is when you look at how do you make decisions in your life, and how do you know you're actually prioritizing properly so that your home stays in order? So there's a model that I use that helps me analyze my decisions, whether that be work decisions I make or business decisions that I make, my relationship with my wife and my children. And it's not linear, but it's, as far as I can tell, the best model that I've seen. And it goes from top down: God, my marriage, my wife and I as individuals, our children, everyone else. And so the reason that is because if I think through that hierarchy, if me and my wife are making decisions that we believe are honoring to God, then we're sacrificing things that are necessary to keep our life, I would say, oriented properly. Next is my marriage. I think that's obvious for those of you that have been married probably longer than me. That marriage is the idea that the team is more important than the individual. A lot of people that have kids, they'll ask me, why are we above our children? And so when you first have newborns, those, there's a time period where they go to the top because they have to stay alive. But as they get older, it's really crucial that we understand that the way that we're monitoring or treating ourselves is going to have a direct impact on them. And so a lot of people think, well, if I move my kids up here, then I'm putting them first. It's like, yeah, but where are you? If most people put themselves down here, it's like, well, so then do you think your kids are getting the best of you, or what's left over? And so it's really important to create some kind of hierarchy, I think, in terms of how to make decisions and prioritize your time, because it will ripple down. And when I say everybody else, I mean everyone else, your close family, your parents, grandparents. And the reason that is because it may sound selfish. I love people. I want people to have really healthy lives and families and relationships. But I meet a lot of people who will try to give time and energy and effort to people down below this line, and the people that are going to sacrifice and suffer the most are the ones above that line. And so that can be really hard, especially if you really care about people. But if we don't learn to keep that in order properly, then the people that we actually say that we care the most about are the ones that are suffering without us being as strong and present as we need to be. So one other idea, I know this is moving a lot faster than I thought, but is the idea of how do you recognize what the stress is in your body, Okay. And so a lot of people can describe sensations of anxiety. But I'm going to walk you through just pretty quickly, very common sensations, physical sensations in your body that are representation of different affect. So if you think of anxiety as usually butterflies and maybe a jitteriness in your stomach, you might feel your heart racing a little bit. Fear and anxiety are often confused. Fear is actually a constriction in your chest cavity. When your body is recognizing that there's a threat or there could potentially be a threat, your heart actually constricts to pump blood out to your extremities so that you can fight or flight. Below that is right in between your solar plex. If you're angry or frustrated, you'll feel heat. You'll feel a burst of heat right here, and then you'll feel it rise up and it'll shoot down through your arms and your legs. And if you think about that, when you get most frustrated or angry, what do you tend to do? Or I know what I tend to do, but how many of you want to throw something or punch something or kick something? Okay. Below that is sadness. So sadness will be experienced more primarily in your gut. Grief will also be experienced in your gut. Shame will also be experienced in your gut. So it takes a little bit of work to figure out which one it might be. And oftentimes that's a hollowness or an emptiness or a pit for sadness. Shame and grief are actually a state. So they're slightly different than just experiencing affect or emotions. One thing I want to also it somewhat connects to the gratitude list is, are any of you familiar with the idea of resourcing in the trauma world? No. Okay, so resourcing in the trauma world in non-clinical terms is simply remembering. And so a lot of times, especially as we get older and we go through life and we have kids and we move cities or whatever the case may be, we navigate different stresses, we oftentimes forget the things that we've been resilient through, or that we've been successful through, or that we've overcome. And so when I'm doing trauma work, there's a piece of the trauma work that requires people to be able to identify legitimate moments in their life that are true, that counter the narrative they have connected to the trauma. So I'll give you an example of this. When I was first starting out, I was at a practice in Los Angeles. And I remember, I think it was my second or maybe my third client referral ever. And I set up a phone call with this guy and his wife, and he started the phone call by saying, hi, Adam, thanks for the call. I'm a lawyer. And I was like, oh no, like a lawyer, like I'm not as smart as a lawyer. And like, it was obviously an intimidation component. Like there was a lot going on in their marriage. It wasn't very healthy, but it shook me a little bit. I was like, it started to create inside of me this doubt that, oh, well, he's smarter than me. I don't know if I can help him. And so I went in with my supervisor and I talked to him about this. And I was like, yeah, I finished the phone call. We scheduled the session. That was fine. But I had this internal dialogue of like, this guy's obviously smarter than me. He's probably more successful than me. I'm not sure how helpful I can be. And my supervisor looked at me and he said, well, has there ever been a time when you've been intimidated in the state that you are right now, and it didn't take you out, like it didn't continue to create that narrative internally? And I thought for about 10 seconds, and a host of memories came back. One of them being prior to being in grad school, I spent a couple years in the state prisons in California, and I would spend entire weekends with guys who had life sentences for murder. So I would hang out in rooms with these guys and have conversations with them about life. And we did different programs for 2 years. And then as soon as I remembered that, I could feel all the intimidation and I could feel the relief, and I could feel the intimidation go and the relief in my body come. And it was simply an idea of resourcing. It's like, wait, yes, this guy might be smarter than me, maybe. Yes, he might be more successful than me, maybe. But they're not coming into the room to litigate. They're coming in the room because their relationship's not doing well. And so there's actually no reason for me to be intimidated by him. And so recalling or resourcing or remembering that moment of being intimidated was a crucial element for me. It's like, wait, I don't know if I've ever been in more intimidating environments than that, but I often don't remember that. And so if you're facing a stressful situation or your kids are facing a stressful situation, one of the things to think through either with them or within yourselves is there a time that mimics this where I felt this way? Is there a time that resembles being overwhelmed, feeling like I'm failing, feeling like nobody loves me, whatever the narrative is, that you can identify with your children and then start to talk through the positive experience on the other side of that and see how that affects their state or your state moving forward. So there's one last really kind of, I think it's kind of cool, but it's kind of weird. And then we can do some Q&A if someone has some questions. So another, I mentioned that knowing what's going on in your body is actually one of the most helpful things in terms of how to navigate dealing with stress. So 2 of you, 3 of you I can't see, but 4 of you I can. So just where is your tongue in your mouth? How many of you it's pressed up like behind your teeth? 1, 2. How many of you it's pressed down behind your teeth? Like it's, how many of it's just completely relaxed? Okay. All right. So I want you all, if you all would do this, just raise your hands above your head. Just hold them there. Breathe. And as you breathe and you keep your arms above your head, I just want you to, how many of you start notice that your tongue is kind of settling more firmly on the bottom of your mouth, like where it should be? 1, 2, kind of.
Oh,
Yes. Okay, I got it. Okay. All right. So I want you to, you can keep your arms above your head if you want. You don't have to, but I want you to think about what's this posture? Like, what's the physical posture? What does this look like? Oh, you guys are all muted.
Right.
Hmm?
It feels kind of like a flight response.
Okay. Like you're flying. Yeah. But I mean, if my arms are up like this, what is,
Oh, I mean, like you're afraid and you're getting ready to run away.
Yeah.
okay. Interesting. It could
You're gonna
be.
get arrested.
Yeah.
Surrender.
Surrender.
Surrender. Okay. All right. So this is the physical act of surrendering, right? If I do this, what I'm attempting to communicate is, hey, I'm not here to fight. It's also, we see this when teams celebrate, right? When your team scores or they score a touchdown, everybody throws their arms up. So it's a form of celebration. You also see this in churches when people are worshiping. You also see this, and this is not the most obvious one, but when your kids are in distress, what do? They move towards you and they put their arms up. And so so your tongue is directly tied to your nervous system. It's actually one of the easiest ways to identify if your system is experiencing stress. So when you put your arms above your head, it's mimicking an act of surrender. It's identifying that right now I believe that I'm not going to be harmed. And it's telling your brain, it's signaling to your brain that you believe you're going to be okay. And it's reducing the cortisol levels in your system. And so it's funny when my kids, they're little, when it's bedtime and they're all, they're jumping on beds or throwing stuffed animals or whatever they're doing. And we're like, hey, like we need to calm down. I'm like, everybody hands up. And they think it's funny, but they do it. And we all take deep breaths and the room settles just a little bit. It's not going to solve your problems, but it would reduce your stress levels and help you stay more regulated so you actually can do whatever's needed in front of you. So I think that's pretty cool. It's outside of the gratitude list. I don't know if you're going to find anything that's more simple than that. So when you find yourself stressed out, all you need to do to help reduce some of that is put your arms above your head. So other than breathing, it's not much more as simple as that. So I'll land there. And then I would love to talk with some of you about just either how any questions that you may have and or how you're navigating, managing stress or anxiety levels with your kids with whatever ages they are. I don't know if that's a hand, like you want to give me a high five, or it's a question. I don't know all the icons for Zoom. Oh, there's a chat. What is? Oh.
Yeah, feel free to unmute yourself if you want to ask any questions.
Anyone have any questions? No questions?
I'll ask some. So I don't have my own children, but I've got a teenage stepbrother and stepsister.
Sure.
And I know, I've tried to get, he's 16. I've tried to get him to, like sit down and maybe do like a little short meditation with me or something
Yeah.
like that. And he will just like get the giggles and like call me ridiculous and kind of just, how do you kind of reach someone where you're not like kind of coming off? He always thinks that I'm being very goofy about it. Like, what would you say is a good way to kind of approach like a calming situation, not necessarily that they just kind of laugh and walk away?
Sure. Well, so part of it is he's saying that you're goofy, but the discomfort is his,
Hmm.
right? So so let me ask this question first. So he's 16.
Yeah.
How old emotionally would you say he is?
Like 14.
Okay, so he's all right. So he's a little bit younger, but
No.
he's not 10.
No.
Okay, so ask him, say, all right, so every time that I offer this to you to do this with me, you kind of giggle and laugh about it. Have you ever asked him, just out of curiosity, like why? Does he just think that the idea of mindfulness or meditation or whatever is silly?
Hmm.
Okay. Is he stressed out?
Sometimes.
Okay. Well, so part of it is what if he is stressed, do you know how he deals with his own stress?
He just kind of walks away from it. It's like, if he could, I think he would just like put it in a box, set that box aside, and then try not to think about it and avoid it.
Sure. Okay. Did you ever do that before? Not
Yes.
wanting to do stuff?
Yes.
Not to go too personal, but when did you arrive at an idea that that wasn't the best way to deal with it?
Uh, I think I had gotten to a point where my mental health kind of suffered, and I realized, whatever I'm doing is not working for me.
Okay.
Got to make some changes.
Okay. So part of it is with teenagers especially, um, part of it is kind of challenging them or confronting them, I think, on well, okay, so he thinks meditation or whatever is silly. It's like, all right, so if he's stressed out and overwhelmed, what does he think is going to be most helpful for him to deal with that? Because putting it in a box and shoving it down will only create more issues later on in life unnecessarily. So part of it is a conversation. Look, if he doesn't take it serious, and is it you guiding it, or are you guys watching like a video or what's the?
I've tried to do like maybe like a guided meditation on YouTube. I've tried to guide it. Unfortunately, that usually also ends up in me laughing, because I can't always take myself that seriously. But
Okay. Yeah, I would ask him. I would have more of a conversation with him. You're not going to get people to do what they don't want to do.
true.
I mean, that's not true for just 16-year-olds. That's, that, I mean, when they're younger, the younger the child, hopefully the more directive you can be and they will listen.
Hmm.
But at 16, it's all about autonomy and independence and things that matter to him. So maybe it's asking him like, hey, when he's most anxious, is there anything that he's ever done that's helped? And if he says yes, and he'll tell you what it is, then you participate in that with him. And then maybe you continue to strengthen that connection with him. And then maybe a few weeks down the road, he'll actually sit down with you on the meditation. The other thought I had was, are there people, I know there's a lot of, I guess, celebrity figures who are more open to talking about mental health and mindfulness. And so maybe if there's, I don't know what kind of music he's interested in, or if he plays sports, maybe seeing if there's somebody that he respects or follows or whatever that has something like that, and just say, all right, well, maybe he'll take it more serious if it's somebody that he kind of looks up to or looks to for some kind of guidance or influence.
Well,
And
thank
there's
you.
one, how to separate your anxiety for your teen from your thoughts and actions. So one of the ways to do that is to make sure that you're taking care of yourself, which is why I presented that hierarchy idea. The reality is if you're around people who are overwhelmed and anxious all the time, they're either going to have a direct impact on your mental or emotional health, or you're going to become frustrated, annoyed, irritated, whatever the case might be, because you can't do what you're supposed to do because they're not functioning well. And so I tend to look at if my kids are overly stressed or overly anxious, yes, we need to help them learn how to navigate that. But the place that I look first is me, and the second place I look is me and my wife. It's like, what's you call it I don't know, the ethos in our home? What's the energy in our home? What's the spirit in our home? Whatever you call it. And is that disruptive or inconsistent? Or are we kind of in a doubting place or in an overwhelmed place? Because it's kind of foolish to think to some level that if our kids are in these places and we are as well, we need to be the ones that can help them navigate to get out of it. But if we can't get out of it ourselves, then it's going to be pretty challenging to help them. So I would say to that question, really be clear on what their anxiety is or what their stressors are, and then also be very, very clear on what yours are, and actually have a conversation about separating those out with them. And be responsible. Again, so I think I mentioned earlier, modeling for our kids. If you model to your kids, you know what, hey, I got frustrated this week and I got angry and raised my voice, and I got frustrated enough because my middle child wasn't listening, and I slapped the wall because I was mad. And I realized, and it kind of shook him a little bit. He kind of was like, oh, that was loud. And so he got upset a little bit, finished brushing his teeth. He wasn't listening to brush his teeth. That was the annoying part. And then 2 minutes later, I went and I got eye level with him, and I said, hey, buddy, I got frustrated. Please forgive me for getting frustrated and slapping the wall. I realized that scared you. And I also need you to listen when it's time to brush your teeth. Do you understand? He's 4. And he's like, yes, Dad. So it's modeling that kind of stuff for our kids. If we want them to learn how to manage their own anxieties and stressors and relate to people in a healthy way, then we need to model that as well. You're welcome. Any other questions or thoughts?
Oh, I have a question. Well, I always have questions, but oh, no. Can you get her out? Oh, that's bad. Hold on. Okay. All right. Okay. So I guess my question was, the exercise that we did that was related to gratitude in a relationship with people, is that more geared toward stressors that are in a relationship? Like, when I don't know if I did this on purpose or not, but when we did that exercise, I guess I picked people in my mind who I felt some tension toward or stress in the relationship, and I did find it really helpful. So my question is that exercise really for like stress in relationships, or can it work in other circumstances or instances or different kinds of stressors? Like, I guess like things going on in the world, or just whatever, like things like that. Like, is that the same concept? Can you be grateful about, pick things that you're grateful about going on in the world today or whatever?
You could. Sure. Yeah. Well, so the idea behind it is that you can work yourself or get yourself to a place of relief or peace through gratitude. Because it's very difficult. I mean, if you go ask somebody genuinely what they're grateful for, or they're frustrated about something, and then you can get into a conversation about things that they're actually grateful for, their frustration relieves itself. It goes away. Now, it doesn't solve the problem. That's why I said these things they're not going to resolve relational issues that you might have with someone, but they will change your perspective or update your memory on what you think about them. I tend to lean more towards keeping it about people, because here's why. And I've discovered this. And look, yeah, absolutely, you can be grateful for your home and your backyard, or for your community or whatever and you should be acknowledging those things. I think that's helpful. But the thing that's most personal and most relational are the people that you care about the most. And if you can bring them to mind, I think that even if the world's falling apart and you can get your mind into a state that we're talking about, then yes, it doesn't mean that it's good to be in a world that's falling apart, but it won't take you out. And if most people can learn, hey, no matter what the stressors are in the world or at work, it's like, if I can slow myself down and regulate some of my own nervous system and be more focused and more clear and more calm, then I'm just going to be a better me, which means I'm better for my spouse, hopefully, which means I'm better for my kids, which means I'm better for the folks that work with me, and it just keeps extending itself out. So again, these aren't necessarily solutions to problems as much as they are exercises to help you manage your own stress and anxiety levels and being overwhelmed or burned out. Would you talk about the signs of burnout at work? When do we need a change? What specifically about your work is burning you out? I mean, the first thing I thought about that was like, well, do you enjoy any part of your job? Because if the answer is no, then you probably need to find a new job. But then I think it's more important to also look at, well, what specifically? Is it everything about your job? Is it someone you work with? Is it that you sit at a desk all day? I don't know. What are the specific things about not enjoying your work? This is a tricky question, but those of you that I can see, how many of you enjoy the work that you do? Oh, that's awesome. I hope the other folks are raising their hand. Look, so some people's work is just work, right? I mean, it's not like everyone, I mean, I don't know how to resolve this issue. It's not like everyone is doing exactly maybe what they were desiring to do when they were 18 or 20 or 25 or 30 or, I mean, there's a lot of life that happens. But I think part of it is keeping it in perspective. And I would go back to the hierarchy that I mentioned earlier. It's like, if you're finding yourself stressed out or overwhelmed and your attitude at work is going down, or you're having if you're having conflict with someone at work, then I would have a conversation about resolving the conflict. So then it would be a matter of, would you be willing to do that? And what are you actually trying to achieve in that relationship when you go into the conversation? Then I would go back to, so the hierarchy, so the decisions, like, is your home in order? Meaning, if my home's in chaos, yes, maybe as a therapist, I could manage it here for a time, but eventually it's going to unravel in the work that I do with clients. And so I want my home to be disciplined and in order and functioning and healthy and joyful and happy and peaceful and all of those things. And as long as my wife and I can continue to create some of that in our home, I come into work focused and I can help people work through really complicated or messy issues. And so another thing to burnout, I would go back to sleep and diet and exercise. I mean, those things, that's how, if you go to a doctor and you start describing how you're feeling, either on a questionnaire, I think they used to do this more verbal, probably not as much anymore. They would ask you those questions. How well do you sleep? What's your diet look like? And how much do you exercise? And that's not by coincidence. All of those things will reduce your stress levels. It's very hard to find people who are focused and active and also have anxiety and depression. That's not that common. I'm not saying you don't have any anxiety, but I don't meet people who are focused and prepared in what they're doing on a daily basis and take care of themselves who have high levels of anxiety. They might have other issues they're navigating, but that's not one of them. Any other questions? No.
Any questions in the
I
chat?
always have a question. I'll ask a question if nobody else. My, I think most
Uh-oh.
are on my control, I guess. Like things that happened last minute, like yesterday I had like kind of like a pipe burst in the house. Like it was pretty, it was a thing, you know, and I was like late and it was like, so how do you handle stressors that are things that are just like really completely out of your control?
Yeah, the first part of your question got kind of messed up, but
Oh.
I think you just asked it again if I'm
Yeah.
okay. So one thing to categorize is to help categorize or organize what's actually going on in life. Like, is it situational or is it chronic? And so a pipe bursting in our home is hopefully, if you have a chronic issue of pipes bursting in your home, like that's a difficult one because you might need to move, but that might not be too easy to do. But if it's situational, it's recognizing that it is situational. I think a lot of times when things happen, we start to just compound everything. And I don't think that's actually very healthy, because one of the things that when someone comes in a therapy room is we're trying to help them pull things apart and make sense of them, not mash it all together and, you know, say, hey, deal with this. It's like you're literally extracting whatever the psychological or the emotional or the relational pieces that are a mess to try and look at them specifically so you can learn how to deal with each one of them individually. And so part of it is, you know, I think obviously what's going to impact if you have a pipe burst in your home, it's also how stressed out were you prior to that happening. Because, you know, it's like, I think any of us would, if I've already had a stressful day and I go home tonight and there's water flooding all over my kitchen floor, like, you know, that's, no one is going to enjoy walking into that moment. But if I've had a pretty calm day, like my stress level is going to go up because it's a problem, but it's not going to go up to some uncontrollable degree to where I'm now yelling at my wife and my kids and cussing everyone out or throwing stuff, you know, it's, so I organizing it, is it situational or is this something that's ongoing within our family or within my life, is a big component to it. And that might even be a good exercise for folks to do. Like even with your kids, sit down and be like, all right, like what are all the things that we're stressed out about, anxious about, worried about, XYZ, make a list. And then organize them. Like, are these things that are situational? Like they're things that are more short-term that can actually be dealt with? Or is this something that we need to know long-term that we're walking into or that we need to prepare for how to handle? Because that helps give some clarity. It also helps give somewhat, you can organize some kind of structure or plan around that. If everything is chaotic and everything is tied together and everything is overwhelming, it's like, well, the only way to start wading your way through that is by stripping it down and organizing it. So you might as well see if you can get up on the front end of that. Hierarchy is first. Yes. So just feeling stretched and stressed for you at your job. I'd look at what are the most stressful pieces of your job and see if any of those can be corrected or managed just a little bit better. Because if you can start from what's the most stressful and start to organize that, then it will work itself out. So this is somewhat unrelated, but in the trauma world, when folks come in and they're doing trauma work, we actually organize a list of the things that have been most traumatic in their life. And we start with the most intense traumatic memory in their affect, in their body, at the earliest age. And oftentimes what you can do with folks is if you actually work out the trauma at that time and they have later trauma in life, a lot of it actually dissipates. You don't even have to go through the protocols to relieve the trauma. And that's part neurological. So if you have sorry, this is getting into a different arena a little bit. So if you have, like, think of this like a neural network, right? So you've got a handful of memories that are connected to this neural network. Let's say they're all traumatic. And this is you were 7 years old and XYZ happened. And this one was you were 10 and 14 and 19 and 25. But this is the most intense one, or this is the most intense one. So in a trauma protocol, you would target one of these two first. And then a lot of times what you'll see is these are connected. They'll actually diminish in terms of their physiological response when they go back to those memories, because the strongest two have been updated. And so that if you start with that at your work, what's most stressful, and you can resolve some of that, then some of the other things that appear to be stressful might not even actually be that stressful. Any other questions?
Any
Thank you.
questions in the chat?
No, I don't see any more. Well, I don't know how this typically ends. Thank you
Of course.
letting me have a conversation with each of you, and hopefully it was helpful. And I don't usually make plugs, but if any of this was helpful, most of the team that works here, not most of the team, all of the team that works here are trained more in things like this rather than just quote unquote like talk therapy or counseling. So we tend to aim a lot more technical in helping people deal with stuff objectively. So if anybody might find us to be helpful, we're available.
Absolutely. And if anyone needs to reach out to Adam or any of his team members, feel free to contact us at Trinity and we can give you all of their information to get a hold of them.